All right, everybody. Well, the Boardman Black and Gold podcast is sponsored by Zecca Enterprises. David, go for it!
All right. Well, to start after this week, I don't think I've ever officially said this. Obviously, I've made many comments, but from this day forward, I'm officially calling for the resignation of head coach Mike Tomlin. I think that I am officially, there is no redeeming anymore. He is done. He will be the scapegoat for everything from here on out until he is no longer the head coach. And I think that, it's probably a blessing for me and for him that we did this a little later in the week because, my emotions have simmered. If it had been earlier in the week, I would have been going off. But this is it. Like, this is what we're destined for with him as a head coach. We're destined. How on earth did Justin Fields have 370 total yards and 3 touchdowns, and we're unhappy? How did that happen? That was the one thing that we were like, if they could do that, we'd be happy. Like, how did that happen? And we fall apart. And our defense, again, Mike Tomlin, you're the defensive guy. Where on earth is your defense? Your offense finally showed up, and your defense crumbles. It happens every time our offense does something good. Like, TJ Watt, can you hear me? Like, where were you? Like, where was anybody on this defense besides Deshaun Elliott? I don't know. Like, everybody, we just crumbled. We were, oh my gosh. Okay, another thing about Mike Tomlin, his team was not prepared. Our defense went out there and got punched in the mouth, just not looking ready. Our offense also didn't respond well, and we just weren't ready. And so we were down 17, and the halftime interview, they asked Mike Tomlin if he was worried, and he was like, no, like, we're not really worried at all about it. And I'm like, what game are you coaching? Like, you are getting absolutely dominated. It was an utter, even though it was a 3-point game, utter disappointment, horrendous loss.
All right. There you have it, everybody. That's the coveted David rant that we've been waiting for. And we got it right off the top for today. Man. Ugh. Did you get it off your chest there, buddy?
I did. I'm glad that, specifically it is horrendous head coaching. The Colts coached well and were game planned, knew how to coach against our defense, even with Joe Flacco in the game, and had a game plan and performed it. And we just don't plan. We don't plan. We plan in June and July, and then we never change our plan again, ever.
Well, let's...
What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts after all that? Well, maybe we can systematically... maybe we can walk through the game a little bit more. I think I agree with most everything you said. You talked for a solid 2 minutes there, and I know that you weren't going to stop, so I wasn't going to try to stop you. But let's look at this a little bit more in detail, just because I think there are some finer details that we can take. I think what you just brought up a second ago with Joe Flacco. So obviously, okay, actually, I will go to this. I will pivot to this, even though my initial train of thought was going in a different direction. All right. What you said that we didn't game plan, and you said that the Colts did. So it's very obvious that Shane Steichen pretty much owns the Steelers. The Colts last year specifically, again, they had a better game plan than us, and obviously our offense didn't have any talent, and we were completely reliant on the defense last year. However, for him to do it in back-to-back years, after the Colts had lost 7 straight games against the Steelers, I think it is very telling. And what you just said about Joe Flacco coming into the game, here's one thing that Mike Tomlin said in his press conference that definitely rubbed me the wrong way, and I know it's going to rub you the wrong way. He said that this is completely paraphrasing, this is not quoting him at all, Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco are 2 very different quarterbacks that do things very differently. So when Anthony Richardson goes down and you plan for Anthony Richardson all week and Joe Flacco comes in the game, that makes it to where it's very different. Now, I want to see if you figure out the train of thought that I'm thinking when it comes to that statement. What do you think is wrong with that statement?
Well, I think that so Mike Tomlin said that they're two completely different players.
Yes, pretty much. That was the crux of his argument was when you plan all week for Anthony Richardson, you're not expecting Joe Flacco. That's pretty much what he was saying.
Well, how about you played Joe Flacco for almost 20 years?
There it is. You did it. You did it. You did it. You knew it. You knew it. That took you how long? It took you, what, 5 seconds to figure that out?
I mean, how do you not? I mean, do you not remember him? He's beaten you a few times in some big situations, and you've also beaten him in some big times. How do you not remember this guy? Like, Joe Flacco is just a standard white quarterback. Like, he literally is so generic, and you've played him twice every year for like 10 years. How do you not know how to coach against him?
And he's old as dirt. He's going to be having the same syndrome that Ben was having in his last 2 years. He gets rid of the ball in half a second. That's exactly what he did through the entire game, and he torched our defense in the process.
Well, yeah, that response is just idiotic. And also, I mean, Anthony Richardson was, before he left the game, was doing well and was driving against us. So it didn't really seem like the game planned well for either of them. That's
a really good point. And I didn't come to that conclusion when I first heard that statement, but that's a great point. They were down 17-0. I mean, what do you expect? How do you expect to respond when you go down 17-0? That very first drive was it was explosive from Anthony Richardson. And we talked about it. He's a guy that loves the deep ball, and he did it very often on that very first drive. Now, I'll ask you this question too, because there's been a lot of controversy in Pittsburgh media this week about it. The very first play of the game, everybody is saying that Joey Porter Jr. should have picked that throw off. Do you think he should have, or do you think it was just a good throw?
I think it was a good throw. I think that he was so close, but like, you know, his momentum, the way he was moving, like, yes, it would have been an insane play for him to pick that, but I do think it was, from the replay I saw, it looked like it was just barely out of his like fingertips.
And I agree with that. I think that it was just a good throw. I mean, everybody was complaining about that in the moment, and it's like, okay, first off, Anthony Richardson had about 6.5 seconds to sit in the pocket during that very first play. I mean, it was a play-action play. They were working on that play all week because they knew that they were going to open things up with that play. And it worked to perfection. They got, almost 30 yards on that play. And then Jonathan Taylor proceeded to run it up the gut. And, eventually they went down and scored after a couple other big chunk plays. So you talked about it. You said that if they can hold Taylor to some minimal runs, then the Steelers would be fine this week. And you said that if they could hold him to around 70 yards, you think that would be a win. Well, take a look at it. He didn't do much better than you kind of forecasted. He was sitting right around, he had 88 yards. So he didn't crack 100 for the first time in 3 weeks. I mean, 88 yards, that's a great game. We have not had a rushing attack better than 70 yards this season. But I think if you're looking at what the Colts actually did on offense, I think we contained Taylor enough in a way. Literally, the X factor in that game was Joe Flacco, and they couldn't figure it out.
No, absolutely. I think that Jonathan Taylor honestly wasn't much. Like, yes, he was there. Yes, he had good runs, but he wasn't like a huge factor. It was the pass game, and Joe Flacco. Yes, I agree, being the X factor, just coming in there and balling out, but the offensive line and just had their way. Like, and we're talking about like Keanu Benton, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Nick Herbig, all these elite guys who can really make some plays. This O-line manhandled them. I mean, TJ Watt, silent. Nick Herbig, pretty silent. Keanu Benton and Cam Hayward, very silent. The entire D-line was quiet. It's like they weren't even there until, I don't know, the end of the fourth quarter.
Well, and even then they weren't. They couldn't get home at all. When they needed a big play, the big play never happened. You want to know how many times they converted on 3rd and long at the end of the game?
How many?
Well, first off, way too many. Let me read this for you because I wrote it down because it was so egregious. Let me see if I can find it here. 4 straight 3rd and 6+ yard pass conversions in the last couple of drives of the game. 4 straight 3rd and longs.
Well, and the whole problem is that, Joe Flacco could just stand. Like, he could just stand back there, observe the whole, field, and just do what he wanted. I think that, I know last week I was saying that we had the best defense in the league, and, obviously I still think it's good, but this week, it was outcoached and also outperformed in every single way.
So you're already off of the best defense in the league train. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, you can't even say that with the performance. The first half alone. The second half, all right, yeah, we only gave up 10 points. That isn't horrible, but
those 10 points were the worst 10 points of the game.
Oh, yeah, the last touchdown they scored was so just they did whatever they wanted to do, which is what they were doing the whole first half. That's the thing is, I still consider them a great defense if the Colts looked like they had to earn it. They didn't. They looked like they walked in. They were like, let's go with our top play that we like the most, and it worked. And they're like, all right, let's pick the next one. And it was just like everything they did was like, oh wow, that worked. Let's just keep going. Like, it didn't look like we made their offense sweat for 1 minute.
No, that's a really good breakdown of that. It really did look like that. Josh Downs. Who the heck is Josh Downs? We were talking about this last year.
Goodness.
That these random running backs that we've never heard of were absolutely torching us last year. And now we've got Josh Downs making these massive 20-yard catches, somehow sneaking his way through the secondary and making these huge 3rd down conversions in the game. What has Josh Downs done all of this season? We talked about it too last week. Michael Pittman was very quiet. He had over 100 yards this last game. This was a breakdown on all fronts.
It was. I was just about to say, him. Who the heck is him? Who the heck is he? I've never heard of him. And then, Michael Pittman had done nothing. And then, of course, he has the best game of the season so far for him. And so it's just, it was pathetic. It was a team performance that was pathetic. It was hard to watch, genuinely. And, when we were down 17-0 and we were we may have scored 3 before the half. I can't remember. But I just remember being like, you know what? We're going to make this a 1-score game. We're going to get in this. I know how we work. But, it stinks because of how poor it was. And I got to tell you, it reminded me of last year when I would say, I can't stand this team. I don't want to watch this team. It reminded me of that this year, or this game.
Yeah, they put themselves behind the 8 ball, and in classic Steelers fashion, they're gonna find a way to give you that false hope. I think I wrote it down somewhere. I wrote down the words "false hope." It might have been in a text to our little Steelers fan group chat. False hope. Don't buy the false hope because it's coming. But that was kind of this game, and it was pretty much. It was definitely the defense's fault. Now, I will say that I do appreciate this. You've talked very nicely about Patrick Queen in these last couple of weeks. And this week, again, he's invisible out there. And it's been a little bit frustrating for as much as we paid for him and as much as the pedigree that he had, that he just really wasn't a big part of any 4 of these games so far. And he's a guy that's wearing the green dot. He's a guy that is the communicator. And he admitted this week that he did not do a good job communicating the coverages or the assignments to the defense, which is something that I think he's going to fix. I think that based on what I understand about Patrick Queen, about his personality, about his desire to win, I think that he has at least a little bit of self-accountability to that, to where he will fix it. And I think that might have been a huge reason, if not the reason, that the defense struggled as much as it did this week.
Well, I really hope that he does, to your point. Yeah, even, I was talking with my dad, and he was getting on Patrick Queen, and I was still kind of defending him. But, I mean, yeah, it's 4 games where, he obviously hasn't made any, huge plays. And, especially this game. I didn't know that Patrick Queen said that, but I can think of multiple moments in the game, after a big pass play happens or after a touchdown happens, Patrick Queen is kind of yelling or pointing to a guy, and it's kind of going what the heck? And so, yeah, it was something I guess, he obviously said it happened, but something was up. I don't understand what. And, I mean, yeah, that has to be fixed because, any offense is going to run wild with that, like we saw. And yeah, I think that I agree. We need a little more. We need more. It's time for him to make a play. It's time for him to lead this defense like he was doing the first 3 games. And so, yeah, I think that he needs a good bounce back game.
All right. We have talked for 15 minutes about the defense. Have we talked a combined 15 minutes about the defense ever?
Man, I can't think of a time when we did, unless it was let's just take a moment to praise how amazing TJ Watt is.
Right. Right. So this is the first time in a very long time that we have been very critical of the defense. And you know what? I said it. I said that this week was going to be a shootout, and I was right. And you know what? I got the score exactly right.
That's crazy.
Except for the fact that I picked the Steelers to win.
Well, so speaking of that shootout, I just want to call out, all right, this is so typical of Mike Tomlin that, we have great defense, and then the one time our offense is you know what, let's score a ton. Our defense is you know what, yeah, let's let the other team score too. It's unbelievable. It's uncanny. It's uncanny. Every time we can score 3 touchdowns, the defense lets up more. You can just go back this game, the playoff game last year, every single play, the last 4 playoff games the Steelers have been in, they've given up 30 or more points. And in 3 of those games, the Steelers, if my math is correct, in 2 of those games, we scored over 30 points. So, you look at oh man, our offense doesn't do anything. They don't do anything. Well, guess what? When they do, our defense decides to crumble. And that is got to be on only Mike Tomlin, because Mike Tomlin, he's really gotten away with, I'm the defensive guy, so it's the offense is the problem. Well, guess what? Your defense was the problem this week. Are you going to fix it? Hello? Please.
Yeah. I mean, that stat that you talk about in the playoff games, everybody talks about how their playoff excuse me. It talks about how much of a playoff drought that we've had. TJ Watt has not won a playoff game in his career, and that's unacceptable. But
It's wrong.
It is wrong. You're correct about that. The thing about it is, though, nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about how the defense, they don't give them a shot in these playoff games. And what happens if we find a way to make the playoffs this year with the highest paid defense in the league, and it just happens again? And now it seems like that, we'll talk about the offense that in just a moment, but it seems like, exactly like you said, whenever the offense figures it out, the defense is just oh, we're the best defense in the league. Oh, we're the highest paid defense in the league. Oh, we have the best defensive edge rusher in history. Oh, we have the highest paid safety in the league. Oh, we have these massive splash play linebackers that we just signed in the offseason. Oh, we have Cam Hayward, who we just signed to an extension. Oh, we have Alex Highsmith, who we signed to an extension. Where do they go? Where do they go? In these big games, where do they go?
No, it's absolutely true. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I did mess up. One of the last playoff games was against Kansas City, where, they still put up a ton of points, but our offense didn't do anything. But besides that game, all the other games, it's pretty accurate. And it is just, it's so frustrating to to see and to watch. Like, what on earth? Like, besides that game in the playoffs, like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, have you guys done anything? Like, does TJ Watt have a sack in the playoffs? Like, I think that'd be an interesting thing to look at because I don't know.
Well, he did have, against the Chiefs, he did have the scoop and score.
Right. And so that's, besides that, I was like, before I thought of that, I was going to be like, has TJ Watt done anything in the playoffs? That's obviously a huge play and a game-wrecking play. But I think it's just it would be an interesting thing to look at is what is, I think it's how does it not get passed on to Mike Tomlin? That how do people not notice that this best defense in the league or the top defenses in the league falls apart when it matters?
Right. And if you fall apart when it matters, then nothing matters.
Exactly.
I mean, we've got the Cowboys this coming week, which, I mean, they're a historic franchise, but they're a franchise that can't win when it matters. So how valuable is a team? How valuable is a defense that can't show up when it matters? And I'm trying to make these connections. I'm trying to think of these playoff losses. So we had Josh Allen last year. It was Patrick Mahomes was the previous one.
Yeah.
Was the most recent one after that Blake Bortles? Or was there one in between?
Baker Mayfield and then Blake Bortles.
You're right. Yes, Baker. Okay, the reason I didn't mention that one is because I have wiped that game from my memory. That might be the most miserable I've ever been watching a football game.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so those four quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, Blake Bortles. What do those four have in common? They're gunslingers. They love to throw the ball down the field. They're fiery guys. They know how to invoke energy. What happened at the very beginning of this game? Anthony Richardson. He's a gunslinger. Is he going to turn the ball over? Yes, he's going to turn the ball over. The problem is he wasn't in the game long enough to turn the ball over. But when he was in the game, he was throwing the ball down the field with effectiveness. Maybe we just aren't built to play against gunslingers.
Well, and that's the worst statement I think I've ever heard, because that's all this league is. And that's the problem with Mike Tomlin and his formula, is that it does not fit in this league. It's like Iowa last year with their defense. It's like, okay, yeah, you'll end up winning some games, but you're not going to do anything when you play somebody, good down the road. And that's the problem with Mike Tomlin's defensive formula. Is like, okay, yeah, you'll beat the 500, below 500 teams, but guess what? You're just not going to beat the gunslingers, who the gunslingers are the ones who win the Super Bowl. And kind of, to what we've been saying about players making plays, I've been content with this guy's name not being called in a while because, he makes tackles and does other things. But speaking of all the gunslingers beating us, where the heck is Minka Fitzpatrick? It's time for an interception. Like, it's time to do something.
I mean, I heard on some piece of media that, like in a joking manner, Minka hasn't had an interception in 2 years, which is like almost true at this point.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy. He's got to get back to his big plays that he was making in 2019 and 2020. And in 2021, and TJ Watt, game wrecker, and Minka used to be a game wrecker. He needs to get back to that.
So you've talked a lot about Mike Tomlin, at least in a defensive way. Now, there's about one other reason I can attribute to losing this game, other than the defense, which, again, is a holistic type of thing. But Mike Tomlin made a lot of really bad decisions this week, and it was kind of the first time, not only did he get out-coached, but he kind of shot himself in the foot in so many ways that didn't even give us a chance to win this week. That very first drive that we had, we got the benefit of a roughing the passer call, which, I mean, I think I know your answer, but was it roughing the passer on Justin Fields?
No, I think this league is too soft, so no, it was not roughing the passer.
All right, so we agree on that. For again, a lot of Pittsburgh people are saying, oh my gosh, that's obviously roughing the passer. No, it's not. It was not roughing the passer. So I will admit, we got a call there.
We did.
That's behind us now. Now you walk down the field, and once again, you are in an indoor stadium. You don't give Chris Boswell a chance to hit a 60-yarder inside, and instead you punt for the sake of what you quoted in your press conference, field position against a team that just walked down the field against you and would subsequently do it the very next drive after you were sacrificing a field goal for so-called field position? I mean, why aren't we giving Boz a shot from 60 yards there?
No, it's ridiculous, especially when we see later in the game he nails a 50-yarder that could have been made from 70. So, he definitely could have made that 60-yarder. I was watching it with a couple of friends who aren't Steelers fans, but they were all like, what? You're punting? What is, everybody and that's the most annoying thing. When Tomlin makes mistakes and makes these decisions, the most annoying thing is that everybody on the couch is like, huh? What? What are you doing? And it's just inadequacy, and I don't understand how he continues 17 years, 18 years making the same horrible decisions.
So we lost the game by 3 points. So there's 3 points right there. And then, okay, so we're going back to Josh Downs. Again, whoever the heck that is. He makes a very obvious catch. And then we challenge whether or not he caught the ball when it was the most obvious catch ever. Hello?
I mean, it's Mike Tomlin just doesn't know how to challenge. I don't how do these people not see how does this guy know football? I just don't understand how you can be this inadequate at your job and still have it. Oh man, all these other guys would be getting fired, and we're watching him getting praised. He rely. You know what? This was a point I've thought about kind of all week. Is that he relies on his players, specifically defense, to make plays to win games. He's the coach that can, make a game kind of close and that's it. But he's going to need one of his players to make a play. And they didn't today. And I just think that if people argue that, I would say a quick tandem right here. But his Super Bowl run in the divisional playoff game, we were losing by 7 to the San Diego Chargers. Santonio Holmes had a punt return for a touchdown. That's a player making a play. That's not coaching. In the championship game, we were up by 2. The Ravens were driving and had a lot of the momentum. And then Troy Polamalu gets a pick 6. We're going to the Super Bowl. That's another player making a play. Then in the Super Bowl, we're winning 10-7. Right before the half, the Cardinals are about to score. If they score, they win the Super Bowl. James Harrison has a 100-yard pick 6. That's a player making a play. That entire playoff run was won by players making plays, not by Mike Tomlin's coaching. I just want to point that out so I can discredit the only thing that people give him credit for. He does not know how to coach.
Wow. That's I give you a round of applause for that. I mean, that is some deep cuts. And again, I want to point this out. The Pittsburgh media doesn't talk about this. I don't think that they've come to these conclusions that I won't put myself into this conversation because obviously you have thought about this. You have systematically put this evidence against him. And everybody can look at, oh my gosh, he challenged an obvious catch, or oh, he didn't challenge the spot on Najee getting well over the 40-yard line that would have been a first down, and instead we didn't get a quarterback sneak on the next play. But, that you just walked through an entire run, and that James Harrison pick 6 is the greatest play in Super Bowl history. It's if you didn't have the greatest play in Super Bowl history, then what does that season amount to? It means that Kurt Warner just won a Super Bowl.
Right. And it's time and time again. We've continued to see that. He rode. I mean, let's not forget that. In our most recent playoff success, it wasn't the defense. it was the killer bees that he was riding the wave of, making crazy plays and doing all that stuff. So he's always just relied and I'll give him this. He's been a 500 level coach. That's what he is. He is nothing like he's below 500. I will say that he's a below 500 coach who knows how to get some playmakers that can make a play to win the game. And we've seen it time and time again. It's never been coaching that has won these games. It has always been a player making a play that's like, wow, what an individual effort.
There is a thing that has been referred to by a very select few people. It is called high-end talent. And I'll repeat that, high-end talent. It's essentially saying that we are going to put the most expensive, best players around a coach, and the coach is literally just a stick figure and has to exist for the sake of existing. And as he exists, those high-end talent players, they win for him. They force it to where that he doesn't have to do anything. The MLB playoffs have just started, and I've absolutely loved the MLB playoffs so far. They have been an absolute joy. The first two games of the wild card series have been incredible, and the Brewers and the Mets are on right now. I don't have the score to it because I'm not by the TV, but these games have been incredible. Now, there's a team that is not in the wild card series right now. That team is the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Los Angeles Dodgers have been managed by Dave Roberts for so long. And they have a Mickey Mouse World Series that has an asterisk next to it because they won it in 2020. Now, I'll tell you this, and we're transcending sports here. I'm trying to make a point. Dave Roberts, this year, if he doesn't win the World Series, then he and Mike Tomlin have to be on the same plane. Because Dave Roberts has Shohei Ohtani, who's having arguably the greatest single season by a hitter ever. He has Mookie Betts. He has some of the best pitchers in the league, albeit they're a little bit hurt right now. But again, they have bought their way to their success. They have bought everything that they own. They have done nothing that is homegrown. They have imported people. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily exactly like the Steelers, because they do have some homegrown guys. They've had some guys that have been around for a while. But if you look at what the Steelers are doing, they are importing the best. I mean, Minka, he's not homegrown. We traded for him. Minka's not homegrown. Patrick Queen is not homegrown. He was an enemy at one point, in fact. So we're getting these guys who are these premium, blue-chip free agents, and they're the best in the league, quote-unquote best in the league, and they can't win with them. Dave Roberts has done nothing in the playoffs. He got bamboozled by this Arizona Diamondbacks team that was just essentially running off the power of friendship last year. They ended up going to the World Series based on the power of friendship. If you look at their team, they were one pitcher and a handful of hitters, and that's it. That is not what it takes to win baseball games. And just like football, it isn't just one or two players. It's a full roster. And the Steelers' defense specifically has so many of these blue-chip guys that they have no business not being successful. And what are we? We're over 30 minutes into this episode, and we haven't even talked about the offense yet, which is such a shame because of all the weeks that we get to talk about the offense, this is the one where we can't, because we're talking about the defense crumbling when it matters the most, and Mike Tomlin, who just can't figure out how to manage he can't be average. Here's the way to say it. He can't be an average coach with a elite team. Would you argue that we are an elite team based on just the simple talent that we have?
Off of talent, absolutely.
Yes. And I'll get it. The offense is very young, but the talent is still there. George Pickens. Come on, man. George Pickens. We've got Zach Frazier, who might be our franchise center. Like, we've got some guys. Pat Freiermuth. Yes, he's not he's not Travis Kelce. He's not Tony Gonzalez. But he's a top 10 tight end when he's healthy. And he's been one of the better tight ends in terms of, like, in the passing game this season in the NFL. Like, we have talent. And Mike Tomlin is finding a way to act like Dave Roberts, and he can't just be an average coach and manage the talent.
No, I absolutely love that analogy, because going back to the start of his career here, he inherited Dick LeBeau's Hall of Fame defense, which, you know, in the years that he went to the Super Bowl, Dick LeBeau was there. He really didn't do much. It was all Dick LeBeau's guys, all Dick LeBeau's coaching. So I think that, yeah, it's a perfect analogy of just this coach has inherited. Tomlin has just inherited. Everything he has really been given to him. He hasn't really earned much, I'd say. And it's really a shame to see him continue to fall apart at the worst possible moments. But as you were pointing out, time to maybe talk about the offense here.
Yes, 35 minutes in, we need to at least talk about the offense because it did something right. Now, not everything went right, but some things did go right, and it started with Justin Fields.
It did. Justin Fields, I mean, our O-line we as a whole got beat up this week with injuries more on the offensive side. But our O-line has just, over these past couple of games, have gotten absolutely destroyed when it's come to injuries and just in general. And so that's very concerning for the future. But in this game, you could see it, especially in the first half specifically, we had no run game. Second half, it got a little better, more with Cordarrelle Patterson. But yeah, to Justin Fields' credit, unbelievable way to stay alive, keep plays alive, make great throws. And really, he himself, in my opinion, really didn't have a mistake. I genuinely do think the craziest thing is about all the 35 minutes we just talked about the defense not doing good, Mike Tomlin not coaching well. If Zach Frazier, and I do agree that Zach Frazier's great, if he doesn't have that botched snap on the last drive, I think we win the game. And that's the craziest thing about it, is that's how good our offense, Justin Fields, performed. And it's just unfortunate that this performance that we've been asking for had to happen when everything else crumbled around him.
Right. And I texted in our little group chat. I mean, that was the most egregious 2-minute drill I think I've ever seen. It was the most royal breakdown of a 2-minute drill ever. And I would love if somebody out there, whether you're a Steelers fan or not, if you can find a 2-minute drill that went more disastrous than that one, please send it to us because I want to see it. I genuinely don't think there has ever been a 2-minute drill more disastrous than that one. And it started off with Najee Harris catching a pass on the perimeter and trying to turn it back into the field of play to get extra yards when there were 3 Colts around him instead of just going out of bounds and stopping the clock. That alone wasted 25 seconds. And that was when the snap, well, I can't remember if that was before or after the snap, but regardless, I mean, you can't waste that time in those circumstances.
No, you really can't. And I agree. It was a horrible 2-minute drill overall. It kind of was just like, man, do you practice this? Like, is this, how often do we look at this stuff? Do we not prepare for this? Because, you know, according to the formula, we shouldn't be getting into the 2-minute drill. So it's like, do you ever practice this kind of offense? And I will say, you know, I think I've heard a lot of praise from outsiders and maybe some insiders just about Arthur Smith. And like, I'm not going to say anything bad about Arthur Smith because I don't think anything was necessarily horrible. Like, yeah, we put up 24 points. That's solid. So like, I don't have any grievances with him. I will say, however, that 2 of the 3 touchdowns from Justin Fields were, nobody's open, I'll just run it in. So that's not coaching. That's, you know, Justin Fields doing that. And again, that's not always going to work. And you'd rather just be like, oh, what a good play call. That guy was open, or designed run like we saw against the Chargers. So I think that, I've heard a lot of praise from Arthur Smith, and I'd say let's pause on the praise. I didn't really see much different from the last 3 games besides Justin Fields playing out of his mind.
My only contrast to holding on the praise or the grievances for Arthur Smith is actually cited in that 2-minute drill. They had the benefit of the 2-minute warning. And before the 2-minute warning, they were cooking. I mean, I think you and I were both thinking along the same lines, I'm sure, that, oh my gosh, like, Justin Fields is gonna lead us to a game-winning drive. Like, we're not settling for a field goal here. We're gonna get 6 and we're gonna win this game. I mean, were you thinking that? Because I was.
Oh, absolutely. I thought for sure. I was thinking that when we were down 17-0, or when we had gotten the field goal, I was like, we're going to come back. This is what we do. And then when we got to the point where we had the ball back with down 3 points, I was like, yeah, we're going to win this game, especially how the offense had been playing.
Right, because Justin Fields led 2 different scoring drives that were less than 3 minutes apiece, I'm pretty sure, with both of them. So it's like, okay, we got the ball back with, I think it was like just under 3 minutes to go. And it's like, okay, all we got to do is go 70 yards and we're in good shape. And before the 2-minute warning, I mean, they were playing a little too slow for my liking. However, they were throwing the ball with effectiveness, which was good, and I appreciated that. However, the very first play after the 2-minute warning was a run up the middle with Najee Harris. I'm sorry. That was the moment when it all went awry. I'm pretty sure the very next play was the Fields, it was the botched snap that went backwards for like 10, 15 yards or something like that. It all starts because you start running the clock again by running it up the middle for a yard when Najee has done nothing on the ground all game. Cordell Patterson did great. He was incredible. It sucks that he went out with injury because I think if he's healthy the rest of that game, I think the game turns out incredibly different. Najee couldn't do anything on the ground all day long. And after the 2-minute warning, after you had an entire TV timeout to figure out what your next play was, you decide to run it up the middle with Najee Harris for a yard. And you get the clock moving again with limited timeouts, and that was when it all fell off the rails. That moment with Arthur Smith, I don't want to say that it completely negates the rest of the game that he called, but again, when it matters the most, are you gonna step up? Are you gonna answer the bell? Like, that is not answering the bell. A run up the middle right after the 2-minute warning with just 1 or 2 timeouts, that's not the play call. It's not.
No, I completely agree. I think that I think we're definitely on the same page where, again, even with the points that were put up and the plays that were called, like, I would say it was more Justin Fields making plays than play calling. And once again, going back to, like, I guess looping Arthur Smith in on this, but going back to, like, just having your players make plays, like, that's not coaching, and that's just not the NFL. Like, that just doesn't slide. Like, sure, it can work to get some wins, but, like, it just doesn't work. And so it's been so disappointing. Again, yeah, that play call right after the 2-minute warning, I forgot that that's what it was called. I mean,
because it's so forgettable. That's exactly why. It's such an uninspired, forgettable play call. When you've been driving up and down the field thanks to Fields' arm, you run it up the gut after the 2-minute warning when you had 2.5 minutes to talk about it. It's so uninspiring.
No, I 1000% agree. It's so disappointing to see such poor. And I feel bad for these players that, like, we got a lot of athletes. We've got some serious talent, like we were talking about. And there's nothing they're doing. I mean, never mind. Granted, there's some stuff they're doing. They're being dumb. But again, that goes back to coaching, not being coached well. And it's like, could you imagine, like, everyone, like, could you just imagine some of these guys on another team with a great coach, like, who knows how to develop a player, who knows how to call a good play, and is like a Kyle Shanahan offensive mind? Like, Brock Purdy comes to the Steelers, he'd die because we just couldn't do anything. But with Kyle Shanahan, He's great. And, like, I do love Brock Purdy. But that's the point I'm trying to make is that, like, other players, like, you want a coach that when a player comes to you, they become the best that they can be. Not when they come to you, they stay exactly how they are or get worse.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I mean, Patrick Queen, like, he leaves the Ravens and he regresses. I mean, talk about the Harbaughs. I mean, you have a lot of respect for them. I have a lot of respect for them too. You know, these guys, they know how to coach. I think about Green Bay. Hey, me and you are Malik Willis fans.
That's right.
Could any quarterback survive in the Matt LaFleur? He's the one that's there, right? In Green Bay?
Yes.
Yeah. Could any quarterback survive in a Matt LaFleur offense? Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We saw it. Malik Willis did. He was shunned in Tennessee, and he goes out and he wins 2 games with Green Bay. Like, it's the system. Can you imagine if the Steelers just had a good system? We'd never lose a game.
No, we never. If we could develop our players and, like, if we just had solid coaches that knew how to do that, like these other coaches we're talking about, it's like, that's what we need. It's you know, people are saying, oh, well, they need to get better at this, they need to get better at that. It's like, no, we need what the Green Bay Packers went and got. We need what the 49ers went and got. That's the entire point of talking bad about Mike Tomlin, is that we need someone like that. And it's just unfortunate to see, it's only been a week. It's only 1 loss. But it's like, look into next week and look into the other games. You can't really afford the 1 loss because guess what? The Ravens are 1 game behind now. The Ravens are back. They're the same team they were. I mean, they're obviously different in a lot of ways, but they're back. Harbaugh's righted the ship.
No, you're absolutely right about that. I've been thinking the same thing. I'm starting to jump off the ship already because for that exact reason, the Ravens are back. I don't know about the Bengals. Obviously, the Browns are not back. The Ravens are back, and they're gonna be up our butts in these next couple of weeks, if not this coming week, if we end up losing and they win.
Absolutely, and that's the big problem. Is, oh man, you just see, that's the thing, is like, okay, the first 2 weeks, the Ravens, they didn't necessarily look horrible, but they didn't look great. They had some close games, but then you come back and these next 2 weeks, especially the last game that they had against the 3-0 Bills. It's coaching. They changed things up. They figured things out. They worked it together. They sat down and were like, this is what's wrong. Let's fix it. The Steelers, when stuff goes wrong, they're like, oh, I guess that just must have been the player. Let's just do it again.
Or it just wasn't a part of the game plan.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, we're going to get beat every time when that's our plan and when that's what we do. All
right. I still feel like we didn't talk enough about Justin Fields and how great he was because, he was. This was honestly a career game for him. He had 315 passing yards. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. He had 50 yards with his feet alone. He single-handedly brought him back into the game. And this episode, I told everybody this episode was going to be 5 hours long, but I have to say this too. After the game, Najee Harris in his locker room press conference or whatever, he was like, why are you all like putting it all on Justin Fields? Like, we're all out there, The comeback was not all on Justin Fields. Najee, you had 1 yard per carry in the game. Justin Fields was our leading rusher. Like, yes, it was Justin Fields. Justin Fields was the Pittsburgh Steelers this last week. Almost by himself. George Pickens could have been if he didn't just, I don't know what he was doing on that fumble, but it was literally, if Justin Fields could have caught his own passes, he would have this week.
Well, and that's the most, again, going back to coaching, I think that, Mike Tomlin just has such a liberal coaching mindset in that he just lets his players all do what they want. They all have their own box. They all can be who they want to be and say what they want to say. And it's like, no, this is a team. Like we saw it with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and even Big Ben. Like he let those guys say what they wanted to say, go on their own things, do their own stuff. And it's like, no, this is a team. You're one. This is a 52-man roster, not a one-man, then another, and then another, and then another. So you're all one. And Mike Tomlin doesn't understand that and doesn't know how to build that unity.
All right. We've talked for 50 minutes, and we haven't even talked about the Cowboys.
Oh, boy.
All right, so let's pivot into the Cowboys.
All right.
So what do you make of the Cowboys to start the season? I'm interested on your take.
I think that they're very. I'd say I don't know.
That's okay. That answer is fine, honestly, because I really don't know either. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. They had such a great week one, but ever since, even their win last week, it's kind of just like, I mean, kind of like us. It's like besides the Chargers win, but kind of like us when it's like they win and you're like, I mean, they got it done, but didn't really look great. So I'd say that similar area to us. I'd honestly put them a little below us as far as how things have gone so far. But yeah.
So honestly, I give the Giants a lot of credit. They lost 15-20 against the Cowboys this last week. It was Thursday Night Football, which again they've had a long week, so they're well rested. However, Micah Parsons is probably not going to play this coming game. He's probably going to be out for the next 2 weeks, actually. I don't think they're not putting him on IR or anything, but that's a big game wrecker that just is not going to be present this coming week. So with a team that, I mean, they've kind of given up some points. Their defense is definitely a little bit, I mean, it's suspect. Deron Bland, is he out for the year or is he just out long term?
I did not see that, so I'm not sure.
Okay, I think it was just that. I think he's out. I can't remember if he's out long term or if he's out for the entire season, but he had some type of injury. So, Deron Bland, obviously, he had pick sixes galore last year.
Yeah.
And then Micah Parsons, who is always in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, he's also not going to be around this coming week. Now, Dak is kind of his own bag of worms. The Cowboys are not running the ball very well. They're kind of running on the fumes of Ezekiel Elliott, and Dak is kind of just existing. He's not been playing like a top 10 quarterback necessarily, but he's not playing like a bottom 10 quarterback either. So it's kind of just a very mid team. And one specific Cowboys fan I know, he's already written off the season for the Cowboys, and he really doesn't have a whole lot of faith in them, which is funny because, I mean, most Cowboys fans are always like, hey, this is our year. But a lot of Cowboys fans, at least the ones that I've interacted with, have kind of been like, no, this is not our year. So how do you approach this coming week with that information?
So everything is pointing to a Steelers win. You know, the Cowboys are really not the team they were last year. Dak is not doing what he did last year. They're really still trying to scramble. They're hurt. People are already talking like, will this be the last year for Mike McCarthy? So it's really just like a dumpster fire right now. And
oh my gosh. Okay, I have to tell you this. I saw a real life dumpster fire today.
No
for
way.
the first time ever. And nothing prepared me to actually see a real dumpster fire. Have you ever seen a dumpster fire in real life?
I don't know if I have.
You would know if you have, because it's a surreal moment when you turn a corner and there is just a dumpster with trash in it that is in flames. I mean, it was a surreal experience. That's a complete aside. Keep going, but I just had to say that.
Well, that's wild, and that's crazy. That's so funny that I used that term today, and it just happened. But, yeah, I think that, you know, everything points to win. Hey, we're home. It's a primetime game. We don't lose primetime games.
Right.
However, my prediction is a 24-20 loss. I think that I don't really know if the defense figures it out. this quick. And I think that I don't know. I didn't buy into the trap game last week. I'm buying into it this week. And I think I just don't know. Everything statistically and all the other stuff is like, yeah, the Steelers will win. But in my gut, I'm just like, we're gonna lose.
I mean, that's really valid. And honestly, all right, I'm gonna bring you into my mind.
Okay.
When I said last week the score 27-24, and I was saying the entire time that the Colts game was going to be a trap game, I said it was going to be a shootout. In my mind, I was just trying to tell myself, you have to say the Colts are going to win. You have to say the Colts are going to win. And if I had said that, then I would have had the very first perfect prediction on this podcast. But the problem is, the problem is my gut just wouldn't allow me to. And I said, besides everything that I had rationalized, the Steelers were going to win. And I said it half-heartedly. I don't know if you caught it, but I hesitated. I said the score. I said the score. I didn't say who was going to win because I was having this internal conflict in my inner being trying to say, oh my gosh, 99% of me says the Colts, but it was that 1% of me that ended up saying the Steelers. And I will never forgive myself.
No.
So that was my mind last week. Here's the problem. I think they win this week, which is so scary to predict because I mean, it makes too much sense. I mean, you and I, we're seasoned Steelers fans. We know in our gut when things are going to happen. I know when the Steelers are going to lose. You know when the Steelers are going to lose. And as much as I think that they should lose this game, I think they're going to win. And I think that they're going to win 31-20.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, again, like I felt that too. I felt it against the Chargers, even though I went for the win, even we did win. But hey, always go with your gut because I always regret it when I don't. And that's what I'm doing this week, even though everything in my mind is like the Steelers should win. I just, in my gut, I'm like, no, we can't start off that good.
Yeah, no, I understand that completely. So I think for the first time we're gonna have some parity because I think right now, what are we? Are we both 2-2? No, we're 1-3 because we both said a win last week, didn't we?
Yeah. So
and as far as our predictions, the two of us are both 1-3. So.
Wow.
That means that one of us is going to go up a game in our predictions. So coming into week 5, we will have a new prediction champion. I think we should keep track of this. I don't think we kept track of our accuracy in our predictions last year. I think this is something that we should do moving forward.
Oh, I agree. I like it. It's a lot of fun.
Yes. Okay. So David predicts a loss, understandably so, coming off of a bad loss. Now my rationale for the win is that I think Patrick Queen, I think he understands that he came up very short this week. And I think he fixes that. And I think Justin Fields continues to build off of his continuously strong his strong performances. I mean, he's gotten better every week. Would you say?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. He's become more and more impressive each game.
All right, so that's my thought. And Justin Fields is not Kenny Pickett. He's not a guy that looks scared out there. He's a guy that is level-headed. He's a guy that's going to go out there and command respect. And I think he's going to go out there. I think he's going to win the game.
I agree with basically everything you're saying. I would like to point out just one more jab at Tomlin.
Got to get one more.
He was not. He's still not the starter. Tomlin has yet to name the starter. He's been like, oh, we're not in a rush. Like, there's no need. And I'm like, that's crap. John Madden said, if you have more than one quarterback, you don't have any. So the factor of having a starting quarterback is huge. And here is, and I just know this. The sole reason why Mike Tomlin has not named Justin Fields the starting quarterback is pride. He's like, if this tanks, I don't want to be on the record as saying that I made him the starting quarterback. And so if he tanks and I go back to Russell Wilson, it's like, oh, that's what Mike Tomlin was going to do all along if he wasn't hurt. It's simply pride. I think that so many of his decisions that we talk about are dumb are because of pride. So I think that, one other, just go under a quick jab just out there somewhere, but that's why I believe he hasn't been named the starter yet.
That's a good thought. Honestly, I hadn't considered that. He doesn't want to be the fall guy if it doesn't work out. And
exactly.
It makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. One more thing, and we are not going to elaborate at all because if you want to check social media for it, you can find it. And even though I know that you're not on social media right now, David, I know you've heard about it. I know you've heard about it. In a sentence, are the Steelers going to get Davante Adams?
No.
Anything more?
We never do this.
Okay. I'll ask you this. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so very reminiscent of Brandon Ayuk. I do think this is a little different because I think Brandon Ayuk more used us to get what he wanted out of the Niners. And this is what I think. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that we've expressed interest.
Yes.
And I know that also the Jets and the Saints are front runners. And here's what I'm going to say. We never do it. This is not, I just don't think, it always goes to someone else. And granted, this whole offseason has been unprecedented, getting Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and Patrick Queen and these guys. It's like, we never do this. So, who knows? Omar Khan could make a move here. I'd be fine giving up a second round for Davante Adams, given how, I don't know. I'd be fine with it, honestly.
That seems to be the winning bid if it were to come to that. Maybe a second round and a late round, but I'm in the same boat. I would do that in a heartbeat.
Absolutely, especially, he's a guy who. Now here's a guy that you can. Can be in the middle. He'll catch everything. He'll catch 5 to 10 yards to 15-yard passes, and he doesn't necessarily have to be the over-the-top guy. So if we get him, we got our all-pro middle guy, and then George Pickens can just focus on the deep ball. And I think it would fill that gap that, we've started to fill with Freiermuth, but I think it would be an amazing filler.
Well, the thing about Davante Adams is he's one of the great separators out of the wide receivers in the league. And I saw this stat, and we're elaborating. I didn't want to elaborate, but we're elaborating anyway. Justin Fields has been in the top 5 of quarterbacks in terms of accuracy, and his receivers are in the bottom 5 in separation.
Well,
top 5 in accuracy. Receivers are bottom 5 in separation. What happens if we get a guy who can actually separate 2 yards? What happens? We win the Super Bowl.
That statistic is very interesting, especially thinking about this trade. And also another statistic I saw is that Adams, over the past 2 years, his time with the Raiders, has led the league in touchdown receptions.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy to think about. But, yeah, so I think that, you're adding the guy who has the most touchdowns over the past 2 years and the guy who gets separation, add him in with the statistic you just threw in about Justin Fields. That could be unbelievably lethal.
So that's why the Steelers have to do this. They can't afford to be outbid by the Jets so that Davante Adams can go back to being with Aaron Rodgers. Does he want to go back to being with Aaron Rodgers? Yes, he does. But the Jets are probably a team that are going to be contending along with the Steelers. And if the Ravens continue to do what they've been doing, then we're looking at another wild card spot again. Who are we going to see in the wild card? Probably the Jets at some point along the way. Or maybe the Jets are the team that knocks us out because we continue to be mediocre towards the middle of the year, and the Jets find a way to figure it out with this star wide receiver reunited with his old buddy Aaron Rodgers. That's something that the Steelers can't afford to happen. If the Jets are going to give a third rounder and something else, then the Steelers have to give a second rounder and a fifth round pick. The second round is our wide receiver round anyway. Do we need another young wide receiver? No, we need a playmaker. We need a guy that can win us the Super Bowl. And honestly, I mean, we've been looking for this big offensive playmaker in the offseason. We couldn't figure it out with Ayuk, which, on an aside, Ayuk hasn't been very good in San Francisco, so we might have dodged a bullet. But if you have Davante Adams on the trade block right now, when he wants to get out, when his value has never been lower, like the Raiders have no leverage. Go get the highest bid, because it's not going to cost you a first round. I don't think it is. But if it costs you a second round and a fifth round, you have to do it. You have to.
Well, I mean, you just painted a perfect picture for how important this trade is. I didn't even realize those connections. So, yeah, I'm all on the hype train with you now of getting this guy as soon as possible. I would love to see it, and hopefully we make that move.
I'll ask you one more time. Did the Steelers get Davante Adams?
I'm going to still take the pessimistic view and say no.
I knew you would. That's why I asked.
What about you? Do you think that we'll get him?
No, for the same reason as you. And yeah. I want to be proven wrong, but until I am, like I always am, I'm not going to believe it. Prove to me wrong that you're going to go out and make that splash play. When's the last time we've went out at the trade deadline and made a big move? Pretty much never.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to happen before the trade deadline. Honestly, this could happen this week, which is why I tried to get this in this episode. It's pretty imminent that Davante Adams will be traded soon. Whether or not it's within the next 2 days is pretty unlikely, but it's going to happen soon. He will be traded, and he will be traded to somewhere in the AFC more than likely. So if you're the Steelers, you can't afford to let this one slip through the cracks.
Absolutely not. I agree.
Well, that is an hour of the Boardman Black and Gold podcast, sponsored by Zeka Enterprises. Man, this was a doozy. We only have 4 hours left to meet my what do you call it? My criteria that I threw out on the Instagram page, which you should follow, by the way, at Boardman and Gold on Instagram for all the updates that we have. We also talk about the game during the game on occasion, so make sure you go follow that, as well as to get all the information on this podcast. But this was a lot to talk about. I think that I think we made a lot of valid points. I don't think that people listening could deny that we've made a lot of valid points.
Oh, I completely agree. And it'll be exciting. I mean, maybe not as exciting as I hope, but it'll be very interesting to see how these points develop. And you know, and you've seen it throughout the podcast. I've wavered at times with Tomlin when times get good, but like I'm going to stick. It's no more. It has to end. And so I'm excited. I'm interested to see how it'll develop through this year.
He's excited to see how it'll develop. He's excited to see Mike Tomlin be the scapegoat. He's excited.
I am.
He's excited to see Mike Tomlin on the hot seat. Is Mike Tomlin on the hot seat? Maybe we should come back next week and find out. We will definitely see, based on what happens in the Cowboys game, if Mike Tomlin is on the hot seat, if Justin Fields is the starting quarterback, if our offensive line is absolutely buns. Is our defense any good? Who the heck knows? We will find out after this Cowboys week. Once again, thank you for listening to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast. We'll be back next week, hopefully after a Here We Go Steelers win. David, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys all for listening, and we will see you next week.